This podcast is brought to you by PodSpot Events.
Hello, Bondi podcast listeners. If you've been tuning in, you'll know that two of our core values here on the podcast are inspiration and growth, and this episode covers both. The guest in this episode is Alfie Robertson, better known as Alfie Gets Hard on social media. We last had Alfie on the podcast in December 2023, just when Alfie had made the life-changing decision to give up his corporate job and dive headfirst into the world of content creation. Over the past 18 months, Alfie has grown his social media following from 0 followers on Instagram to 346,000, built a strong personal brand, and generated over $1 million in income over 2024, more than 10 times his previous salary. In this episode, Alfie shares his incredible journey through 2024, the principles that helped him build a strong personal brand in record time, and his favorite AI tools, including ChatGPT, that helped fuel his success. Now, here are my key takeaways from the conversation. Number 1, hard work and consistency are irreplaceable, and achieving big goals often requires significant sacrifice, particularly from a social perspective. Number 2, understanding your target market and their problems is critical for monetizing your content effectively. And finally, number 3, a lot of the principles that Alfie applied to building his personal brand and that he applies to his content creation can actually be applied more broadly to any area of your life that you want to achieve something in. The key question is, are you brave enough to make that commitment to yourself? In addition, you may have noticed our logo change. I'd like to thank Liam at Creo Design Agency for his help on this. And if you need help with your design and branding, you should definitely check these guys out. You can check out their work on their website, which we'll include in the show notes. As always, remember to give us a follow on Instagram at the Bondi Podcast to stay up to date with all of our guests and episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a follow on Spotify, where you'll also find all of our episodes. Cheers. Alfie, welcome back to the Bondi Podcast, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in again.
Pleasure.
Look, so you might remember from our first episode, mate, the first question that we ask all of our guests is, what's your favorite thing about Bondi? You said last time it's the morning community. I imagine that's probably not changed. So I'm going to ask you a different question this time. What I'm going to ask you is, if there's one thing you could change about Bondi, what would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it would have to be probably the council. We live in a pretty nanny state, Australia generally, New South Wales. And I think that has loads of pros in terms of like safety, infrastructure, like what we've built around that. But getting things done is incredibly bureaucratic and incredibly slow. And I think when you want to try and introduce things, particularly community-led things, so we had a run with Coffee and Chill and things like that, just becomes very difficult. There's a lot of yellow tape. You know, gyms are facing a lot of like yellow and red tape to sort of get through to do something that's super beneficial for the community. So I feel like the council is still quite hard on things, even if it's outside of alcohol and like a massive net positive. So for me, it would be council being a little bit more on board with the community and fostering that growth. But I can see both sides of the coin. I guess without them, you'd have everyone just, vendors on the grass, and it would turn into like Venice and things like that. So that's what keeps Bondi unique. But also, yeah, when you're trying to and you're going up against it, it's definitely frustrating.
So what were you guys trying to do that you kept butting heads with the council?
Yeah, so we took an LA-based concept. The founders there, George and Blake, great guys. It was sort of creating a house party feeling on a Sunday morning. The idea being Coffee and Chill. So combining coffee, ice baths, saunas, so community-led event with, DJs. We had samples from various health and wellness brands, and a great way just to connect people within the community on a Sunday morning as maybe an alternative to going out on a Saturday or Friday night, or maybe as a bit of a hangover buster on the Sunday morning up to them. But the idea it was great in execution, but very difficult to get council and some of the key players on board because they're very apprehensive of those things. They're very protective of, the shoreline, as rightly so. Just can be quite hard to activate in various facilities and venues.
So are you guys not trying to run that from your residence?
At one point we did as like a little bit of a warm up, but being a commercial activity, given it's ticketed, you can't run it from your residence, which is absolutely fine. And we managed to find some great venues to work with, but it was just difficult getting off the ground. I mean, it's so hyper competitive around here, and there's just a lot of yellow tape. We had to get council permits. We're bringing in a generator, whether the generator was placed inside the property, outside the property. There's just so many operational things that make it really difficult to execute something like that.
So is Coffee and Chill, is that canned for now?
In Australia, I think it's going to be difficult to get it off the ground, particularly here in Bondi. Jake and I like absolutely loved it, and Bree, we had a great team who was running it here, but it's just hard to scale, particularly with all the other stuff that we're working on. I think one thing we learned very quickly there is in-person events, incredibly gratifying, but a lot of organization, a lot of stress goes into it. And on the day, it's all worth it. But the days leading up,
Yeah.
sort of pulling your hair out. And, when various things happen, we literally had council turn up to our door at one point before one of the coffee and chills. So I think we realized, with all the things that we're doing across like Pure Body, across our personal brands, digital products, incredibly scalable, a lot less stress, and you can deliver so much value at scale to a global community. And given we've got a global network, it's like leveraging that opportunity now is probably the priority. And then maybe coming back and revisiting something in person or more brand building. They're just very different business models and way to engage and provide value. So yeah, we learned the pros and cons of both.
Easier to put on a run club, mate, right?
That's true. Although a run club, you still got to be there, still got to show up, still got to like bring the morale.
Yeah.
And we've become very close with, I don't know if you know the Raw Dog boys over in Austin, like Noah, Ian, Tin, and Darren. And they're the same. They're like, yeah, it's amazing. And they've just got Gymshark as a big sponsor.
Amazing.
They've got some awesome sponsors and one of the biggest run clubs in the US. But they're the same. They're like, yeah, we can't go anywhere because week on week we have to be there Saturday, 8 or 9 a.m. whenever they run it. And they've got to show up. They bring them around. They come in at 150%. People will match them at 100%, but they've got to really be there, living and breathing it every single week.
So is the Bondi one still going, mate?
No, not our one. We partnered up with Sydney Run Club, who run it every Friday.
Nice.
And again, it was just nice to take some of that like operational lift off us, so we could just show up. Obviously, still connect with all the people there. So if you are around on a Friday, kicks off around 5:30. Come down by the promenade. It's a great run. Classic Bondi to Bronte. It's so beautiful. So such a great run and just great for people to experience, particularly over summer as people flood in from overseas and get to have a little taste of what it's like to live here, which we know is pretty awesome.
So Alfie, do you get a lot of blow-ins? Do you get a lot of tourists come in, like potentially people that might have seen you and Jake on Instagram and then go, oh, well, I'll go and fucking run with Alfie and Jake? Do you get a lot of that?
Yeah, I feel like the Run Club definitely became a little bit of that as people were like traveling through. We had our good local contingent as well. But yeah, as people come through, it's a good opportunity. I think they see the geotag maybe, or they see the location and they hear about Bondi, and then it trickles down. If you mention one word ever, now Google serves you up every piece of content on that word. So maybe they drop Bondi somewhere and then we're getting plastered to them. And yeah, it's nice. It's awesome to connect with people and hear like, oh yeah, it's my first time like in Bondi. Saw you guys, a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, particularly at the moment when it's, pretty wet and miserable in the UK. Same in the US, it's winter over there, and then they come over here and it's summer and everyone's cheering.
Yeah, that's like a Bondi bucket list thing now. I want to go and run with Alfie and Jake, right?
Oh, we'll take it.
Just a quick word from me, guys. We're making some progress, Bondi podcast listeners. We're up to 450 followers on Spotify and 150 subscribers on YouTube. I would love to get both of those numbers closer to 500 across both platforms. So I've got a quick favor to ask. If you haven't, could you please quickly pause this episode, go and hit the subscribe and follow buttons on both platforms. It really helps with the show and ensures we can keep bringing quality guests and episode to you guys. Cheers. Mate, what I really want to get into this year in this episode is sort of your journey since we last had you on. So 2024 was like a massive year for you. You were last on the podcast at the end of 2023, and it was around that time where you decided to quit the corporate job and go all in on this content creation journey. How was like your first year of going all in, mate?
Yeah, it's been wild. It's amazing to look back on. And actually one of the huge pros of content creation is you get something to look back on. Maybe sometimes it's a few photos in your camera roll, maybe it's a few messages with close friends. But for me, I've literally built this in public. And I love the phrase building in public. And that's really what it's been for the last 12 months is, just building, growing, lots of personal growth, met a whole lot of people. It's like networks exploded, done a lot of travel, and just an exploration of like what content creation is actually all about. What is the underbelly of the creator economy? What does that look like in a digital landscape? Who are the people that support you? What are the main functions of the business? And there's so many different ways you can take it. And as someone who's like a student of the game of marketing, like business, which I absolutely love, background being finance and marketing, when I spoke to you last, is sort of building that climate tech company in Singapore and exited out and went all in on personal brand. And at the time, I remember just thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm leaving a high paying head of climate markets, great title, LinkedIn, loved it. And I remember being like, just for Christmas, like, wow, I'm going to go all in on this brand. That's me. And it's like literally going all in on yourself. And there's no more literal way of doing that than building your personal brand. Yeah, it's been a wild journey.
So what stands out over 2024? What one or two things stand out?
Massive growth in terms of, I think as you depart and like start to build your own business, you start to unpack everything that goes behind that. And building your own business and always being on, people can describe to you what it's like, but until you're in that position building, you're never going to know. And that was funny, where the position I was in at that Singapore climate tech startup, I was sort of felt like I was in this like 2IC position. You know, we're both young guys. We knew each other from uni. He was the founder. I was sort of brought in as head of strategy, moved to head of carbon markets, felt like I sort of had a real good grip and felt like I was devoted to the company. And just switching to like, when you're the person that if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. And like, it's on you. You're the last line of defense and you're the first line of defense. That's just like a whole different ball game. And I think there's that saying of like, your employees and people who work for you are never going to work as hard for you in a business. And I've learned that. I've learned that from the perspective of being the employee that thought they're working hard, but didn't work nearly as hard as the founder. And now I'm seeing that as the founder. And now we've got a team of employees as well, and they're fantastic. But at the end of the day, it's on my back. It's my business. I'm the one that, you know, is there to either put the piece together or pick it back up, and they're going to help me in between. But I'm that last line of defense. And that's, yeah, just a step up in responsibility and realizing like, if you want something to grow, you got to put the time, effort, and toil into it.
So that's what stands out over 2024. What about in terms of travel, mate? I see you've been traveling quite a bit.
Yeah, really been making the most of it. I mean, part of building personal brand and an online business is you have the freedom to move anywhere you want. And, you know, we keep coming back for summer because Bondi is an amazing place and it's an awesome place to call home as well. And I think particularly this summer that's just been, it's the most I've ever felt at home in Bondi, which is a great feeling as well. I think being plugged into the Virtus community is a huge part of that. We sort of came back after a big stint of travel away in Bali, Europe, sort of all over the US as well. We've been to a lot this last year. And then coming back and getting the opportunity to like connect with the boys who founded Virtus, Rawson and Hamish, who have done an amazing job at building an epic community that's unlike, I think, anything Bondi's really had before. And they've got those two spots, one up at Beach Road and one at Hall Street. And just them being like so true to brand and living and breathing it, very much same ethos that Jake and I adopt with Pure Body. Like, we're not just, oh, when the camera's on, we're eating this. And when the camera's on, we're training hard. Like, they live and breathe that as well. They're there training people still, and they run the business, 2 gyms, and they're still there doing PT sessions. And I think connecting with them and then building that community. And now there's just a whole bunch of creators running around that are all mates from New Zealand. And it's a good vibe.
Unreal, mate. Yeah, I know what you mean about Rawson and Hamish. You might think that, you know, the energy that they show off in the gym might just be like, that might just be gym only, but it's the exact same if you bump into them on the street in Bondi, right?
Yeah. 2 of the most like genuine, nicest guys. Like Tasmania, it breeds some good people.
Yeah, 100%, mate. 100%. Look, I want to ask you about some of the changes in your personal life that you might have noticed over 2024. So, like you said, you've really went all in over the course of this year, and to work really, really hard, you have to make sort of sacrifices elsewhere in your life. From my own experience, you know, doing something new like the podcast or taking the decision to stop drinking alcohol, and doing something a little bit different than you were previously doing for maybe like the previous 10 years, you start to drift away from like old patterns and old friendship groups. You start to hear things like, you've changed and you're no fun anymore. I get the sense that you've maybe gone through that experience as well. Alf, can you tell us a little bit about how you found that?
100%. Yeah, I think last time we spoke and last time we caught up was sort of coming to the tail end of 75 hard, or maybe I just finished it.
Yeah.
And I think that, to be honest, was the hardest 3 months and like the most defining chapter, like 2.5 months, where the change is so stark in contrast of you've been this person up until that point, and then I'd really put the foot down and been like, no, I'm doing the 75-day hard challenge. I'm not drinking, I'm working out twice a day. I'm committing to this. And that's just like a massive tank of the social life. And I think in that point, that's where there's the real separation. Now it's like you almost have this separation and then you move to the person you become and that new you, and you find and connect with new people who are like-minded. I love the analogy Hermosi and Chris Williamson talk about it, the lonely chapter, right? Where you leave your old set of friendship, your old set of friends, but the time of like that journey of self-improvement, you haven't necessarily built the characteristics that allow you to relate with the group that you want to be with. So there's this big gap between the person you were and where you want to be, and you're not quite qualified or accepted at a point yet by that new group of friends. So I think there's always going to be a lonely chapter for anyone who steps away. And I think when you move into podcasting, content creation, starting a business, by definition, you put yourself in a smaller bucket of people. You put yourself in a minority of people that are going to go for it and are going to have a go. And I think with that, there is like a gap and a contrast, because it's very easy for the people who are not having a go to say, oh, it's not going to work, or be less supportive, and they're going to be right until they're wrong. And I think that's just something you have to accept. And then maybe, you may say it and people will be supportive as well, but I think you've got to accept that people aren't going to understand and you're doing it for your own reasons, and you've got to run with that and accept it and just make it work.
In terms of like making it work, like I've gone through it myself. I feel like now that I've definitely come out that other side, that other end, where I'm just a lot more comfortable with this version of me now, and I don't really care what those previous friendship circles or that previous network sort of thought about what I'm doing now. In terms of like dealing with it, I don't know how you sort of dealt with it, but in terms of dealing with that sort of that lonely period where you do spend a lot more time just sort of with yourself. The way I sort of got around that was I sort of head down and just focused on the podcast. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be going out on a Saturday night, or the phone stops ringing. What can I do with this spare time? I just found myself just head down trying to progress things, certainly with the podcast. Did you find that yourself, Alf, when you were like in that sort of lonely period where you just head down on personal brand? Did you just use that sort of nearly like that energy that comes with being in that lonely place? Did you just use that energy to just try and take off for the personal brand?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I mean, you cut out a lot of distractions by default, not going out. Like if we just take that as a single move that you've done, like you don't go out on a Friday, Saturday night. It's like one, you've got like the actual time, then you're not hungover, then you're avoiding all the drama, you're avoiding all the follow-ups. Like you generally just bought back like 10 to 20 hours in your week, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Like if you've added 20 hours in your week, and if you're consciously putting even half of that into something moving you forward towards whatever your goal is, of course you're going to get ahead. It's the most like logical step. And I think taking that time and accepting and not being like, oh no, I need the validation of the people around me. I need those, like friendship, social connection, incredibly important. And you look at Blue Zone, some of the biggest predictors of happiness was based on social interaction. So I'm definitely a believer in having a social group around you is incredibly important. But I think there's also a time to look inward and be like, you know what? I do want to get ahead. I do want to do these things. And if I don't give it a real crack now, I never will.
So looking back, Alfie, are there certain friendship groups you can sort of picture in your head now where you go, I don't hear or see these guys?
We've actually had an interesting one in Bondi where, to give you the background. So Jake was creating content. He was the first man to put himself out there, and brave soul he was, because at that point no one in our friendship group, no one in our direct network was a successful influencer, creator, made it big, had gone viral, any of those things. So he put himself out there, and that was back when we were living in Ramwick, when he was talking in front of a brick wall, with his tripod, and the content was shocking. Please, if you have the time, which will take a while, scroll all the way back to his old videos, because they were like talking head, just crummy microphone, like just awkward on camera, all of those things. Anyway, and
the fucking good on him for giving it a crack, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And he was like, we were really supportive early on, because we knew that for Jake, he was really going to be working at Barry's. He was at Barry's boot camp for the rest of his life, or not the rest of his life, but he was going to be a PT for the rest of his life if he didn't make a move towards that. I remember for his birthday, we bought him a tripod, and like that was sort of the sign for him. Like, look, we're supportive. Let's do it. Like, do whatever you need to do. And as he started creating content, it took him until May. This was in January. It took him till May to get to 5,000 followers, and then this week happened where one video took him from 5,000 to 250,000. Crazy, life-changing moment. Anyway, as that year progressed and I started content, so that was in May, and I started content in September, that was like Jake and I had really like pushed ourselves a little bit out of the friendship circle by being like, no, we're doing content. And there was sort of this, sentiment, I think, from the friends around us, like, yes, supportive, but also like, come on, bro, put your phone away, stop filming everything.
Come out for a beer.
Yeah, exactly. I think we, in a way, isolated ourselves and identified, no, we're doing this thing. And, you have to accept that, yes, it's going to be weird. Maybe we're a bit awkward. Maybe you want to laugh behind the back, whatever it is.
Is there any sort of like, fuck you, double down energy?
At that point, I don't think we were doing it to like prove our direct friendship group wrong. So like it wasn't that negative from them. But what has happened since then is then, as we've seen some success, then we're like, Marley, you should jump on this, was our housemate at the time. And, his background in medicine, and he went back and forth and was quite negative at the start on the concept of social media. I think he didn't want to be grouped into the medfluencer sphere as he finished up at Sydney Uni doing medical school. And then all of a sudden we sort of kept creeping on. We kept messaging. We had group chats. We said, when are we seeing Dr. Miles on this? And sure enough, he launched his social media, did incredibly well early on. 6 weeks, got to like 80,000, and he's still killing it. He's like 150K now. It's opened up all these doors to him. He's locked in like brand deals with Samsung, some of these huge brands, which, can't say how much, but it's more than his first year of medical. So you can sort of put into concept like, wow, it opens up a lot of doors for sure. And I think that was like a tipping point where suddenly Marley's doing it. Then we saw like Seb and Sam Cam, some of our good mates, jumping into it as well. And more people are like putting their hat in the ring. And I think that's because once you see something is achievable and you see someone within your direct network achieve it, it becomes like, oh, I could probably do this too. So I think breaking that limiting belief of like content creation, being someone who's followed, building a brand, building an audience is only for a select few that are, I don't know, in the States, in Europe, living these lavish lives is not the case. It's like, if you can build and provide value, you can build a voice in the space, and you can connect with people and have all the benefits that come with building a personal brand globally.
But that's the big barrier. It's overcoming that limiting belief. That's like the initial hurdle that you really need to get over. And I think a lot of people bump up against that.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, conviction is the biggest predictor of success in any vertical of life. If you have self-conviction and you truly believe, you can, it sounds cliche, but you can achieve so much more than if you're questioning and full of self-doubt. I think self-doubt is natural and you're always going to have that. But if you can fall back on a conviction and a belief that either you're destined, either there's a path for you, I think that's why so many people also can lean on things like religion. If God's set that path for you and you have true conviction in that, whatever drives that conviction, you will go and do those things because you'll take the risks and you'll work towards it until it works. Yeah, I think conviction in itself is such a powerful tool, and just having the ability to believe in yourself when no one else does is one of the most difficult things, because it's so easy to just accept and be like, no, everyone's right. Like, oh, I'll go back in. Just to be that sheep mentality.
Yeah, it's hard though once you start taking some steps forward, it would be hard. I would find it with this podcast. I've started it now. I'm on this journey. If I turn around tomorrow and said, oh no, I don't want to do it anymore, it just wouldn't sit well with me. Like once even though I'm still at like the baby steps stage, right? I just don't think I'd be able to switch it off.
And that's the other side as well. Once you start building, you've then, a bit like before, it was very hard to create the contrast of change between who you were defined as. You've now started part of your brand, part of your who you are is a part of this podcast. And that's because you've done it for a prolonged period of time. It's like once you start getting up early, and if you consistently got up early for a year or even a month or 2 months, and everyone around you starts to know you as the guy who gets up early every day, then it just becomes part of your brand identity. And that can be used in a negative way if you're the guy who always goes out and gets smashed and hammered. And it can be in a positive way if you're the person that's out there trying all the new stuff, getting up early, hitting the gym every day. Like, you can use identity of self perceived of how people perceive you around you as like a super positive thing to drive you forward.
100%, mate. So Alf, I want to change lane a wee bit here and talk a little bit about, the service offering. So when we last had you on the podcast, end of 2023, as you say, you were just off the back of the 75 hard challenge. So I think at the time, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think the service offering at the time was like, people want to know how you train and how you eat, and sort of some guiding principles about how you sort of live your life and your lifestyle. And you were sort of, that was the service offering. That was what you sort of had the offer, and that's what people wanted to come to you for. How's that evolved since then?
So around that time, I was just overcoming the limiting belief that, can I provide value? Should I be charging for this? Like, all of those questions were sort of rising of, am I going to charge for the service that I provide? Do I just deliver it for free? I didn't really get into content for creating money, all those things. As it sort of evolved, I ended up creating what's defined as like a fixed program where people could go in, they could buy it. It was on training, nutrition, so just some basic principles. And it was a real like, this is what I do, follow it as you will. Typically like 12-week programs for around $40, $50. So pretty affordable. And yeah, as those kicked off, they did really well. So in December, that first month, like super took off. And that's why I sort of went all in on the personal brand.
Was that a surprise? Sorry, Alfie, when you first saw those numbers coming through December
Yeah.
23?
Yeah, it definitely was. As it sort of all opened up, I was like, wow, it's like it's like a third of my salary in a month. This is pretty crazy. And I was on a pretty good salary at where I was in Singapore. So yeah, I think that was a real eye opener to be like, okay, I built an audience. That audience also trust in me and believe in me enough to separate with some money online, which I thought was just a crazy concept at the time. I was like, I didn't actually realize the power of people buying things online, particularly because I felt like all people get to see is like an 7 or 8 second video. It's not like they get to like how much they really know or feel like they know about me. So that was the first indicator of like, wow, there's a bit of an opportunity here. And then the next one, which was super positive, was in that January period of seeing the transformations and seeing the positive messages and the change and the reinforcement that it was like, okay, first one's you built an audience, well done. Next one, you managed to sell a service. And then it's like, you get really good results as well. And that was just like this fantastic positive reinforcement loop of like, okay, people are separating money and then they're incredibly happy months on because they're getting the results that they wanted. So that was what sort of hit off and be like, okay, there's a real opportunity to grow here. Let's see what we can grow it as a business. And that was my first taste of like online business, online personal training, and what that looked like. As it sort of evolved over time, I realized there's an opportunity for more customizable, more personalized service for various clients. And what I found was, yes, I was patting myself on the back for the amount where I was sort of generating from these low ticket $40, $50 programs. But I also had no way to decipher whether someone who would have paid 40 and 50 would have been quite happy paying 1,500 for a more personalized, customized service. So that's when I like flipped the model, which was only in November. It took me a while to realize this. And that was sort of I was almost due to the success I was having. It was almost like, oh, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And that was the mentality. And then November, flipped the model, and that's been a massive change for us. So we launched Pure Body, which is where we customize, personalize. They get a bit of Jake and I's time. We came together on that, and they get the ability to work with us directly one-on-one. And that's where we've seen like some really great clients come through and get some of the best results we've had. And that's having a more personalized experience with it. But
so if I came to you, Alfie, in that scenario, what would I get from you and Jake?
Yeah, so first thing we'd want to understand, like, what are your goals? What are you struggling with today? Like, basically baseline you of where you are today. Once we know that you're a good fit for the program, we'd really want to understand on a comprehensive onboarding, like dietary habits, lifestyle habits, all of those pieces today, like mindset. Are we overcoming limiting belief, which is a part of personal training as well? There's some people that don't have that conviction and don't believe that they can achieve the things or can't commit to it and they're lacking, discipline or whatever component it is. We also do a baselining test. So we put together this pure body baselining where we measure at a percentage of body weight exactly where you are for all your key movements. And then we also do the same for range of motion, for mobility. From there, we do a score of 100 that indicates like where you're at against the pure body standard. So the goal there was like, we wanted to create some level of uniform measuring that we could do across all of our clients and then bring them to that. So we retest every 12 weeks. So based off those results, we then build your program. Then you'd get direct messaging access to us and you get frequency of calls depending on what package you're on. So you could be meeting fortnightly, monthly, but we always do an onboarding to make sure everyone's set up correctly, got access to the app, all of those things.
Great, mate.
Yeah, it's been really good, and we've had 16,000 clients through that. It's been pretty wild.
I'm doing the numbers in my head now, mate. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, Alfie. So that's the more personalized programming. What else?
Yeah, so as that's evolved, what I found, and I was one of the most important things as you grow an audience, one of the things people miss the mark on a lot of the time is understanding their audience, like who's in the audience, who's actually following me, why are they following me? And this helps two ways. One, from a content strategy perspective, as you start to grow, by definition, you can see the attribution of followers. So for example, if I post a reel tomorrow, I can see how many people will follow me from that one reel. So it actually tracks that in Instagram. And why that's really important is the way reels and short form content and a lot of social media works is you post a large quantity over the year, but there are only a select few that go really viral, right? And what I found is when I actually dug into the data and I did a meta-analysis, like in meta-analysis, not a meta-analysis across multiple studies. When I looked into Meta's data in Business Suite, pulled the 600 videos I posted across Alfie Gets Hard. And in the top 30 videos, they had contributed over 80% of my audience. And I went through and then categorized them for what they were. And it was like lifestyle, daily vlog. There was a lot of mindset in there. There was the nutrition. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I started to tally it up and broke it into my content pillars. So I went across training, nutrition, mindset, and lifestyle. I said, like, why are people really following me? This helped from a content perspective, just double down on what was working. So daily vlogs, did a lot of those, became more about like mindset. And if you see where the accounts shifted over time, it's become quite heavy on that mindset. And I identified nutrition being a big piece. So that's where like Pure Body Eats came out as an account. We worked on that together. That's done really well and been a big driver of the success. And then I also identified this mindset lifestyle piece. And I saw that the content that I was posting, even though it wasn't always super value driven, it may have been a daily vlog, it may have been a mindset piece, it had, 15, 20,000 saves. And I was like, what is driving people to save this content? And then I sort of realized my ideation process when I'm going through and looking for inspiration. I often save Instagram reels and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll use some of that for inspiration, and I save it in the platform. And that was a bit of an eye opener that there's probably a lot of people in my audience that may not necessarily be following me for training and nutrition advice, but actually are looking to build their own audience, their own personal brand, and are looking for content inspiration on the way that I create content. So that was sort of connecting the dots to be like, okay, let's try an offering. So I decided I'd release this sort of, it was a content playbook. It's like basically did it at $97 and it was going to run people through ideation. So how to ideate, how to film, how to edit, when to post, how to post, hashtags, whether you need them, whether you don't, just sort of some basic principles of content creation that I created. Film the content, about an hour and a half content, put together this nice, playbook and released it. And it was $97. And yeah, in the first month sold like 1,500, which is pretty wild. So I was like, wow, there's a huge appetite here for this type of like content. And that's when I was like, okay, I'll bring on some one-on-one consults. So hired a guy who's basically behind creators. When you have high ticket products in the digital sphere, you have what's called a setting team and a closing team. Setters team is to build rapport with potential clients. They sort of look at leads and they go, okay, let's understand more about their goals, their pain points. If they're a good fit and they qualify, then they set them to a closer's calendar, and the closer's job is to sell. So if we think about the three functions of your business of marketing, sales, and fulfillment, sales is sort of the one that you can outsource. Marketing is content creation. When you're building a personal brand, it's very important that you're close to the canvas with that. And fulfillment, normally you're selling some fraction of your time or you're heavily involved in the delivery of it. So with that, sales becomes a great one to outsource because there's people out there with better selling skills than myself. So I brought on this guy, and he was like, look, I think there's an opportunity. I told him there's an opportunity here to build potentially some one-on-one consultant clients. I've sold this. You can, let's see what we can do. And in the month, it sold like 102 one-on-one consults, which was pretty crazy, and probably the hardest hours-wise I'd ever worked in my life, because I was doing about 8 hours of calls every single day, doing one-on-one consults. And I quickly realized that the done with you model, which is typical one-on-one consult, is extremely exhausting. And although there was like a fair exchange of price and all those things, it probably was getting to a point where I was just going to completely burn out. So I did that for 2 weeks straight. And in the background of that, working like 8 hours every single day, I started to build Amplify. And Amplify for me was, how do I take all of the learnings from the content playbook, the 1,500 people that had gone through that, and these one-on-one consults, and build a platform that is community-based and split into 2 components, grow and convert. And I do weekly Q&As now, every Monday for content, every Friday for sales. The grow section was about how to build your audience and how to do that in a step-by-step process. So I decided I don't want to just create modules and just course content that sits out there in the ether and there's like 10 hours of content. It was, how could I actually remove a lot of the fluff and take someone step by step, whether that's creating their account for the first time or an account they've had for years, and take them step by step, the process that they need to do to build that account organically. The other side was conversion and how to build a high ticket offer. So that was understanding your audience, taking them through exactly what I did, doing that meta analysis, understanding the demographics, polling their audience, getting on discovery calls, understanding their target audience and who they're actually speaking to, both from a content creation perspective, but also from building an offer. Then taking them step by step, how to build a really, really good offer. And I use the Hormozi's value equation. So that's your desired end state times by your perceived likelihood of achieving that end state over the time delay it takes to get there, multiplied by the effort and sacrifice to get there. And it's like how to build a grand slam offer, and then taking them through like, what does lead generation look like? What are call to action, CTAs? How do we drive inbound story messages to then take that through a flow? How do we sell long call? How do you position yourself? Building pricing cards, basically everything they need to go step by step. And we're about 2 months into launching that. And it's been super successful. We've had, some clients earn over 100,000 a month. So from going from like a 10K offer, or some people starting completely fresh, getting their first viral reel, like there's such a range. And that's what I wanted to create it for, was someone could be starting fresh, someone could have an offer, and we could supercharge someone's offer as well.
So where do you think the demand for that kind of service comes from in today's society, Alfie?
I think it's a movement away from traditional 9 to 5 jobs, people looking for alternatives. I think social media, for better or worse, is a constant comparison platform where like people can, it's not comparing yourself with Bill and Joe down the road. It's comparing yourself with everyone in the world. And that's super motivating for some. And I think for me, it was looking around and being like, wow, this is like the land of opportunity. Look at what we can do and look what all these other people are doing that I know better than me can do. And that's sort of that mentality of like destined conviction where you want to head. Or it can be incredibly negative, like, oh, look at everyone, like everyone's so much better than me. And I think how you react to it's completely up to you. We can't change the reality that you live in, that it is now, that there is now the ability to compare ourselves at that scale.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic at play as well. It's one I find myself battling with from time to time, the positive motivational side of it, but also like the negative comparison side of it, which is it's a really interesting dynamic. Where do you think the majority sit?
I think the majority are consumers, and I think social media is a net negative for anyone who just consumes. I think it's net positive for anyone who creates. And that's not to say I think everyone should create content. I'm just saying, like, that's just what I think of the platform. If I wasn't creating content, I probably wouldn't be on it. There you go.
Chief Nutrition have come on board as a sponsor. Chief Nutrition specialise in clean, healthy snacks that cut the crap. My personal favourite is the collagen protein powder. If you want to find out more about Chief Nutrition, listen to our episode with Veronica Larasova. And if you like what you hear, Bondi podcast listeners get 10% off all Chief products. Just follow the link in the show notes. Cheers. Let's do a bit of a deep dive into some of the principles around content, and specifically your content, Alfie. I'm really interested in your perspective here. So if I look at your Instagram account, well, if I look at Alfie Gets Hard, there's sort of like 4 sub accounts, right? There's Alfie the Creator, Pure Body Eats, Pure Body Trains. What have I got wrong? Well, then there's your main account, Alfie Gets Hard. From your perspective, what's the importance of having those 4 different accounts, and why wouldn't you all just do it on one account?
Yeah, so when you begin, start with one. Like, don't overwhelm yourself. If you're aiming to post every single day, I think that's an overwhelmingly difficult task if you don't have a good process and set up for ideation. When you start to grow, and once you've sort of mastered that skill, what you'll find is, as you do that analysis and see what content performs with you. For example, for me, I was documenting 75 hard. I started posting daily vlogs, various content was going out, documenting my day. Food then became a massive talking point, but it wasn't something that I orchestrated myself. It was more audience led. So they came in and started identifying like, oh, what are you eating there? What are you eating there? Because in the daily vlog, I was capturing my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That then led to creating more nutrition-based content. That then did really well. That then basically gave me an opportunity to be like, okay, well, if I want to speak on nutrition, I don't really want this account to turn into pure nutrition. What if I just created a new account that could deep dive into some of the nuances of our diet, and we could take a step into a little bit more about our philosophy of what we eat? As that concept sort of came out, I was like, you know what, let's just create a fresh account for this. It's going to be better to like niche in, and then everyone who's interested in nutrition can just follow that account. So that's where Pure Body Eats came. And then same sort of mentality for the training. I sort of realized Alfie Gets Hard became more of this aspirational lifestyle mindset account. And I wanted to stay true to that without diluting it with like training sometimes, nutrition sometimes, just if there wasn't that overlap of people that were interested in all the different content pillars. So separating it out allows you to niche down. And I'd say like niching down more broadly when you start, it's actually better to start open and broad. If you start too niched early on, you won't offer your audience an opportunity to give you that feedback on what they resonate with. When you start broad, and remember, like if you're creating fitness content, say you're a fitness enthusiast and you're like, you know what, I want to speak on lifestyle, mindset, training, nutrition, all the stuff around fitness, but like I did, then start broad and start from like a high perspective of, okay, I'm going to speak on those 4 content pillars. And from there, let your audience give you the feedback on what they resonate with. Because you may not know it yet, but you may have the most amazing food creation, like you may have the most amazing cooking and presentation, but you just don't rank it yourself. But other people are seeing that and are really interested in the way you eat. So I think there's all these components that when you start, you just want to start broad and then slowly niche down. Creating lots of account allows you to deep dive, and Alfie the Creator is a great example. I can speak on some very specific topics within that, but I don't dilute the messaging that would be going out on Alfie Gets Hard. It also, when you're building a business, is really important because story selling is like one of the most underrated things ever. Like your stories are so incredibly valuable because we think about a customer journey, reels go to a new audience. So that's your awareness. Then when we think about conversion and purchase, stories are like the greatest way to drive conversion because they go back to your existing, already trusting audience that are already maybe in that sort of thinking about consideration phase of that journey. So we can use stories. We need to think about, okay, well, what are the mediums I can do stories on? And the more accounts you have, the more stories you can put out to those audiences. So Alfie the Creator can put out a story today specifically targeting people interested in content creation. Train Pure Body can do one specifically on training. Pure Body Eats on nutrition, and Alfie Gets Hard, I sort of take my pick every day. And I think for people who are building an audience and want to build a business online, they need to value stories. Stop posting your green smoothie, your juice, all that stuff. Like you've got to think about when a story is being posted, if you think about the catalog of stories as if you're watching them, you're going to be up against everyone with their cute dog, the green smoothie, the morning walk. If you're there saying, hey, reminder, I'm a coach for hire, and I've got a service and it's a valuable service. And if you're struggling these pain points, then I can solve them for you. That's a great contrast to have. And you can do that every single day, because every day you're going to be up against the smoothie and the cute dog. People aren't just opening your story back to back. But yeah, so that's the biggest thing I noticed was like, stop posting so many random stories. No one cares about your life. Just post one, remind people you're a coach, and your views will like triple.
And Alfie, are there any benefits from an engagement or an algorithm perspective of having these separate accounts?
Yeah, well, again, like when we think about growing a following and why follower attribution is one of the best things to be looking at in terms of your content. If you think about if someone comes in and follows Alfie Gets Hard and they come from a daily vlog, what that tells me is they've seen that daily vlog on their feed. It's resonated with them enough to click on my profile, and then the profile's resonated enough with them to follow. So therefore logically follows that in a week's time from now, if I post another daily vlog, that content's probably going to do quite well with that person because they've already resonated with a very similar piece of content. So therefore, as Instagram sends it out, goes to 10% of your existing audience. If that 10% of my existing audience are resonating heavily with daily vlogs and I post a daily vlog, it makes sense that they would then engage with it, sending it out to more people and more people. Now we think about like the content pillars as overlapping circles. So training, nutrition, mindset, and lifestyle. As you start out, it's logical to go, if someone's interested in training content, they're probably going to be interested in the diet that supports their training, and probably in the mindset that supports training and nutrition, and then probably in the lifestyle that's wrapped around that as well. If I then threw in Ferraris and fast cars, it's not as logical to follow that someone who's interested in training, nutrition, mindset, lifestyle is going to be also interested in fast cars. So you start to create these much smaller overlapping circles. It's not to say there's not people who aren't interested in fitness and fast cars, but it's just a much smaller circle that you're targeting. And if you look at someone like Jake, who speaks on mobility, his pillars could look something more like, okay, shoulder mobility or upper body mobility, lower body mobility, running prehab, warm-up exercises, I don't know, cool down exercises. And it's like the probability that someone who's interested in a warm-up exercises is also going to be interested in a cool down exercise is so high, right? And that's the power of niching down, is your overlapping circles become great. Your overlapping circles have greater and greater overlap as you niche.
How do you, Alfie, deal with this concept of like content fatigue? So a year or so ago, if I open my Instagram, not me necessarily, but if anyone opened their Instagram, they would have saw maybe quite a lot of you and Jake, right? And maybe a year or so ago, you were like the shiny new thing. Oh, we need to follow these guys. But if they keep opening their phone and they're seeing a lot of you, and after a while they might start to get fatigued. It's kind of like the same thing over and over again. I'm not necessarily saying it is, but certainly if people are scanning it for 3 seconds, it's a lot like, it's potentially the same thing over and over again. They sort of maybe lose a bit of engagement because for a period of time you're the shiny new thing that maybe lasts a honeymoon period. How do you get through that honeymoon period and keep that audience engaged?
Yeah, I actually think this is one of the misconceptions in content. Like people think they need to reinvent the wheel every single time. I'd say like the truest statement ever is people don't need to be taught, they need to be reminded. And what I mean by that is people already know. They know that eating less calories is going to help them lose weight. They know moving more is going to help them move weight. They know all of these components that go into building a physique, getting their life on track. Like, the alcohol conversation. People know alcohol is bad. They know it's not beneficial to whatever goal they have. Like, no one can dispute that, but they need to be reminded. And our job as content creators is to package up and polish these existing ideas that, we're not going to change thermodynamics. We're not going to change any of these components, but we're going to package it up and present it in a new way that's new and exciting to our audience. So it's on our job to sort of recreate it. And it's almost to like, instead of recreating the wheel, it's to package it up in a nice new box, whether that's a better delivery mechanism, whether that's higher quality content, more engaging content. That's sort of the job of a creator, is to go through and be like, okay, how can I take these concepts and distill it? Because it's storytelling at scale. That's really your job. And your job is to tell these stories, but the stories are sort of locked and the myths and legends aren't going to change, but we can recreate them. But like if you were going to do a new Shakespeare play, it's the same story, but it's repackaged in a new modern way where they're rapping and doing all of that. Same concept.
Is there a pressure that comes with that?
No, I think you separate yourself from it. Now I've moved it into like there's pressure of building marketing for a business. Like, yes, you're dependent on it for lead flow because that's part of organic. But at the end of the day, like it's the same amount of pressure. I think if you can separate yourself over time, I think this is one thing that's really helped me. Like the reason I haven't changed my name is Alfie Gets Hard for me is it's very much a piece of me, but it's my presentation online. It's the persona, like it's the extended version of myself that sits online in the ether, and I just can separate myself from it because yes, it's who I am. Yes, I do all the training. Yes, it is me. But at the end of the day, it's who I present myself online. Like who I am behind closed doors. It's pretty similar, but there are some differences. And building a personal brand gets you very close to putting all of your life online. But also, the more you grow it, the more sort of selective and tactical and strategic you can be about what you present.
I still follow the humble Alfie Robertson
There you go.
Instagram account that only has about 3,000 followers.
Yeah. Which is more than it did when it started. I feel like a few people have found that. But I definitely, as I said, like I never post on that.
Yeah.
And it's funny looking back on it because I remember back when I had, just like a normal personal account, didn't use it for business or personal brand building, anything like that. And I'd still get so like, what caption am I going to put? Like you still get worried about, it's almost that social pressure of just like getting worried about what you post to like your friends and family.
Yeah.
Which is so weird.
Yeah. I had a look at my own personal account like on Friday there, and I've not posted on it since September 2023, which is about the same time I started doing the podcast.
There you go. It's one of those things like, social media can be the upside of social media, obviously the network, the connection, all those things, but I just don't think they're heavily utilized unless you're creating content because no one outside your inner circle is seeing your content. So it's not like you're extending your network. You're just like looking for validation from your existing network.
So Alfie, you fully immersed yourself in this content creation world over the last, let's call it 12 months, a bit longer. What changes did you see over 2024 and what are you expecting to see in 2025?
I think there's a few like nuances to the platform. I'd be very interested what happens if when TikTok gets removed. I think that will create like a flood of eyeballs to Instagram, just as like elimination process if it's the platform remaining. I don't think there's too many algorithm changes or like strategic things that I really deploy because the way the platforms are built is they're behavioral based. I don't think the human behavior is changing that much apart from like driving shorter attention span. But then on the flip side, I think there's almost been a pushback where people now want more raw, more authentic, and just the way that we're getting engaged is changing. It's gone from like highly polished edit videos to more raw, authentic, and that's sort of just been over time. And I think that's more a craving of people wanting to understand everything about the back end of people's lives. So when it's polished, when it's raw, we straight away think add selective, like this has been done purposefully. Whereas when it's like raw, authentic, shaky iPhone footage, people seem to connect with that more because it's like, oh, this is like actually who they are behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think I saw you post one on Alfie the Creator. It might have been yesterday. That was a wee bit sort of pick up the phone a wee bit shaky.
Yeah, exactly. I think just more like authentic, but also content sustainability. I think is one of the most important things from a creation perspective. We speak about the burnout. I think the burnout on a creator side is there's so many different mediums that you can communicate on. Like people get stuck, I think, looking at top like videographers, editors, and looking at really sexy style of content that's design over function. And they go like, oh yeah, that's what I aspire to create content like. When in reality, like if you're driving value, it just needs to be function over design. And that's where you see like, the music, like, da, 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 and there's like reading the caption. There's a huge portion of like Instagram has over 1 billion people on it. There's a huge portion of people that will have come from Facebook and will derive all of that information out of the caption. And people sort of see that as like, oh, that's I don't know, that's not a real content strategy. It's like, I've seen accounts build huge followings doing that because if you're getting value through in the caption, that's just as good as if you're getting value through, in the video.
Did you, Alfie, did you veer into that world of super polished videography and editing at one point and you've sort of scaled that back a bit?
I think the style and like of like what was authentic. I was always shooting on an iPhone. I'm not a videographer editor. I literally just edit on CapCut. So I think I just had maybe like an enthusiasm and an eye for it early on where I was like, wow, this is fun documenting my life. And that's the most important thing. When I was first creating content, like first 40 days, took me about 45 days to get to 1,000 followers. And I like loved every moment. Like creating a piece of content every day was actually really enjoyable. It was like a creative outlet because I was in this corporate finance job where I was like working with numbers, spreadsheets, and then being able to like sit on my phone and do something creative and create this piece of content that I could put online and like publish my work was actually really enjoyable. And I think you need that level of enjoyment. I speak to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I just hate it. I don't know what to post and what. So I'm like, you're sort of missing the point here. Like, it should be an enjoyable process of documentation or storytelling, providing value.
Yeah. This question's maybe linked, mate, and it's maybe more broad. So I asked you there, did you veer into something and veer out? We both went to see Stephen Bartlett when he was in Sydney last year, and one of my key takeaways from that session was he said, if you want to be successful, you've got to increase your rate of experimentation and failure, get comfortable with failure, and take the lessons away. So, to what extent have you sort of used that philosophy over the past 12 months, where you've thought, this might work, quick experiment, success or failure, make that determination, and if it's a failure, just go, okay, we'll chalk that up as a failure, we'll learn from it, we'll move on. How much do you actually apply that to your strategy?
Yeah, I think it's probably been a defining thing in my life thus far, like 25, very young. But one, it's like sort of having the balls to just give it a go, which is that self-conviction of like, nah, I could probably do this. And that can sometimes be like just delusion in a sense. Like, I love the concept of like, you got to be delusional because you got to believe it will work before anyone else does. And then I think it's also just being like, all right, work, pivot, change, move. And that's like the fail fast, like just run fast, break it, move, fix it, move on. And content's just like that as well. And I think you can't be too attached to the outcome. You've just got to focus on the inputs. And that's across business as well. There's plenty of business ideas of like coffee and chill is a good example. Like, we gave it a red hot crack, was way more difficult than we thought. We're like, is this really gonna like balance up and be worth our time when we're building this like huge business online that's incredibly scalable? We're reaching so many people, having such a positive impact, and then this is like pouring hours and hours into an event that's very hard to scale. So like, that's a great example of something where we're just like, you know what, cut the strings. Like, we have to accept sometimes we're not going to be right every time, but we only need to be right once for it to work. And content's exactly like that. The way I describe content creation, every time you post, you're there with your bat and there's a glass plane in front of you and you have a swing and you don't know you're going to break it, but if you stop posting, you stop swinging, and that's guaranteed you're never going to break it. And the best part about content is like, you just need one swing and it could break panes and panes of glass down the line, because the way it works, all that traffic to your account sets off other things that you've done before. So I think, yeah, like having a swing is all about like, yeah, taking that first step, which like the first swing's always the hardest because everyone's watching. And it's always embarrassing when the glass doesn't break and you swing it as hard as you can, but you just got to keep swinging.
There's a mindset associated with that though, Alfie. It's, some people, if they've poured a lot of effort and energy into a thing and the thing doesn't work and they pull the plug on it, that can like sap their energy for a while.
Sunken cost fallacy.
Correct. And then on the other side, I suppose it's failure, getting comfortable with that, taking the learnings and moving on quickly. A lot of people might dwell in that first category. From you, were you ever in that category, and was that ever a learned skill to sort of transition to this sort of feel quick mindset and getting comfortable with that? Is that a learned skill, or is that something that's always just been within you?
I think it's learned to a degree. I think you can always pick up like fragments and remnants of something and put it somewhere else. For example, the company that I failed when I was, because I was in this journey of like, I knew I wanted to do something more. I didn't know it was content creation. I sort of started everything at once, which a lot of people do. And I was like, I'm going to document 75-day hard journey. I'm going to lock in for 75 days. I'm going to keep doing my corporate job and I'm going to launch this startup. And the startup was like trying to solve the issue of people going away on holiday and wanting to sublet their place. So it was like a rental sort of piece. Anyway, that was like a good example of something that I did it for, spent all this time, energy, effort, developed the app, developed a website, set up the company, hit the ground running. Great example of front loading on product and not speaking to the audience. First of all, I should have MVP'd, like minimal viable product was something a lot more basic. Anyway, as I started to realize like, this is not going to be viable. I don't want to be speaking to people trying to organize dates and line up everything. And it started to boil down and fail. I jumped ship very quickly on that, even though I'd poured a lot of time, effort, and money into it. And like a good example of the way that I took a remnants of that as a good reminder is like that same company that I set up is the same company I run everything under now. So like Go Summit is my entity, and that's still the
That still
entity.
exists in the background, does it? Yeah.
Well, like Go Summit's still the parent company of everything I run, and the trust is under that. Like everything's
Yeah.
like basically gone high level from that. So it's a good reminder of, you know, like you can still build on the ashes of a failed creation.
Are you trying to grow your business or brand, but often find there aren't enough hours in the week? Have you considered hiring a virtual assistant to help with all those tasks that you don't want to do that could easily be delegated? I'm talking about admin, accounting, digital marketing, social media, and much, much more. Well, our show sponsors Remote provide businesses, entrepreneurs, and social media influencers with the top virtual assistant talent in the Philippines. If you're curious but still sitting on the fence, why not use the referral code Bondi to trial a virtual assistant for 2 weeks for absolutely free? That's 2 weeks, absolutely free. All you have to do is go to the website www.remote.com.au/contact, enter your details, enter the referral code Bondi, and someone from Remote will be in touch. I've added the link to the Remote website in the Instagram bio, and there's also a link in the show notes. And if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, please get in touch with us over Instagram. Cheers. And look, it's interesting, like we're obviously talking about content creation today, but a lot of these principles that we're talking about, this sort of feel quick and get comfortable and take the learnings, that's something that could be applied in lots of areas of your life. It could be applied in your 9-to-5 job. It could be applied in your training, your relationships. And a lot of these principles that you do apply to your content creation and your personal brand business, they are things that can just be applied more broadly. One of the things I wanted to talk about that sort of fits under that banner, I suppose, and we've touched on it a little bit, just that importance of understanding your target audience, who you're speaking to. And it's something I've been giving a lot of thought more recently on the podcast, given we're sort of 30 plus episodes deep now, you get more sort of stats and info sort of coming through. Just how important is that, Alfie, just to know that target audience and know exactly who you're talking to?
Yeah, it's crucial. I mean, not just in content, but if you think about product market fit, which is essentially the ability to serve your target audience's needs. And the only way you can serve them and match your solution, which is your good service product, to that is by actually understanding like what are their needs, who are they, build the avatars, understand like it's Chris, he's this age, lives in Bondi, does this is what he does in the morning, this is where he gets his coffee, this is where he what time he goes to bed. Like you really need to understand that, and that informs every decision you should be making. I think the unique thing about content creation is you can build an audience and then you can have all that data and they can give you that data and they'll willingly come on that journey with you. And that's everything I've done is build the audience first and then match the product to it. So it's not even like product market fit. It's like create a market fit and being like, okay, this is the audience I'm building. Let's understand exactly what their needs are. Okay, like they need a more personalized service. There's people in here who are willing, who are like high disposable income. They work in corporate jobs. They want a more like professional hand-holding service. Then it's like, okay, well, let's build something that is in a higher ticket bracket that gives more of Jake and I's time, that is more personalized, is more professional. And all of a sudden, like you just start building an understanding for that audience. So a great example is those saved reels I was telling you about. They're like 15, 20,000 saved reels on some of my posts. And I was thinking like, okay, people must be saving this, come back and create it. What's a really good product I could create that would solve this for a lot of people? So I decided to build templates in CapCut. I basically took my top performing videos that were most saved. And I was like, I'm literally just going to place this in CapCut. It's going to be perfectly synced to the music. The text is already there. And I'm going to give it to them in a template format that they can just click into CapCut, drag and drop their videos, and all of a sudden they've created exactly the same reel as fast as possible. So I've taken all the ideation out because I deliver 20 every single month, 5 training, 5 nutrition, 5 mindset, 5 lifestyle. And then I've taken all of the editing lift out of it. So all they need to do is film, give them a beautiful organized folder section of how to film, what shot needs to go in each place. So it's like the easiest solution for them is literally just turn up, drag the film, and then they're done. And that's like a great example of understanding the target audience, understanding their like struggles, pain points, which are normally around ideation, not understanding how to edit, wanting to create polished content that looks the same, but not having the time, and then giving a solution, which is like ideation's done for you, editing's done for you, and it's incredibly time efficient.
So that would be the target audience for the Alfie creator
Yeah, exactly.
audience. Yeah.
But that was just looking at Alfie Gets Hard and
Okay.
seeing the stats on what was getting saved.
So let's try and bring that to life with a bit more of a colorful example. Alfie, tell me about like your avatar for Alfie Gets Hard. Who are you talking to?
Yeah, so Alfie Gets Hard, I think, speaks to where I was in September 2023. A little bit lost, looking at the world potentially in a corporate position, normally in like a 9 to 5 job, looking around, going like, "Oh, it's a big world out there, and I'm not really harnessing my full potential." Whether they're drinking, whether they're, just whether they're trying different things or they haven't even got there yet, but they know and feel like they're destined for something more. So I think it really speaks to who I was a year and a half ago. And like in that mode of I'm following this person because I can see what they've done and I want to create some of that success in my own life. I think that's one of the avatars. I think the other avatar is someone who's maybe a little bit later on in life and has prioritized their career. They've gone in on the 9 to 5. They're not going to leave that happy where they are because they prioritize their career. They've got ahead, but potentially they've missed and left some of their health behind. So that person's then looking and being like, okay, how can I reclaim some of that health? Whether that's working with someone one-on-one, implementing some of those lifestyle habits, nutrition habits, things like that to sort of claw back some of the health that maybe they've sacrificed.
That's helpful, mate. And it's good that you've actually gone to that level of detail in terms of your thinking. I think that's what sort of needs done when you are thinking about that target market. And I think it's interesting that one of the avatars is nearly like a reflection of yourself. And I think that could be probably applied more broadly as well, certainly to a lot of solo entrepreneurs, people who do have a bit of a presence online. You probably find that, a high percentage of those people, that target audience, is probably a reflection of a version of them or a version that they maybe used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we want to relate to people. And we tend to look up to people that have gone and done things that we're yet to do. But we also relate more when they come from a position that's similar to ours.
100%. How much, Alfie, do you sort of integrate the use of AI tools and ChatGPT into everything you do?
ChatGPT, definitely.
So how do you use that?
Just like brainstorming, ideation. I use it a lot for avatars. It's super useful for. Can plug in like all the data. I actually take all my meta analytics, put in all the demographics, send it all into ChatGPT, and then get them to build back avatars. I just find it a really useful thing of like, I think everyone hates to start with a blank piece of paper. And like for me, starting with something down, I'm much better at thinking about something critically if someone's already put the first idea there. And then I can sort of analyze that, add things, take away. So definitely for that.
You can have a bit of a conversation with it, right? A bit of back and forth.
Yeah. And I love that feature. Like I always go back into my history chats if I'm going to ask it in the same vein so that it can pull on that previous information. So like if I'm building pricing cards or if I'm thinking about avatars on like Alpha the Creative versus on Train Pure Body or something like that, I'll always go back into those respective chats. And now it knows Pure Body, it knows Amplify, it knows my brand, it knows Jake's brand. It's funny how much it picks up over time. And yeah, it's an incredibly useful tool. But in the back end as well, which a lot of people don't realize, I think in the creator economy, we have a lot of leverage leaning into like developing countries. So got a team of 20 plus VAs in the Philippines that I work with. Actually going over to Manila towards the start of April. Doing like a week there, and I'm taking all the VAs, having like almost like an unofficial Christmas party in April, very early. But it'll be first time meeting them all in person. But they're a massive help in the back end, and they do everything from like customer support, inbound lead inquiry, editing, emails, like just so much in the back end of like day-to-day admin that builds such a lift off my plate, which is fantastic. And then the other side, we've got 30 plus sales team on Pure Body, 20 plus on Amplify, that are all commission structured. So they sit across Australia, US, Europe, UK. And that's a big team as well to manage. So a lot of people think it's just like solo entrepreneurship, run it by yourself, but it's really not. Once you get to that point where, I think the skills you learn is content creation to begin, build the audience, sales, how to build an offer, sell an offer, and then delegation. You need to bring in really key people around you and leverage that as well.
For someone, Alfie, who from working with you previously and doing the previous podcast, you're really hands on and you're really across the detail. Was that a difficult transition to sort of starting to get comfortable outsourcing certain things?
Yeah, I think you've got to outsource. I sort of see it as like low and high value skills. So you've got to identify your own time and rate per hour. And I work that out by like projected monthly revenue divided by the hours you're going to work over that month. And then I think you've just got to think about like, what am I going to delegate here? And you've got to accept you can't do it all. But building SOPs, so your standard operating procedures, has been like a massive learning for me. And it's almost like front ending the time and being like, I'm going to build really solid SOPs, processes, systems, tracking, sheets. And although that's going to take me an extra 20 hours up front, it's going to save me hundreds of hours down the road. And I think doing that is like just a great process. And as you scale, you have to leave behind the SOPs and procedures. And it makes you better as well when you start building the process, because you may not have thought about it. And when you actually see it on paper, you're like, that's actually inefficient. I can change that.
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting, mate. Look, I want to pivot the conversation to just a little bit about mindset. From the outside looking in, you've put a lot of energy and effort into building this personal brand and this online presence and all these businesses over the last year or so. I want to talk about motivation, and particularly motivation on those days where it doesn't necessarily come as natural. We all wake up in the morning feeling a little bit different. You might have had a shitty night's sleep one night and the weather might be good. You might look out the window and say, it's actually a perfect day for a beach day today. You know, where we live, I know from your personality, Alfie, that even when you are feeling like that, you'll still get up and get shit done. You've got that get shit done mentality from what I can see from the outside looking in. On those mornings, what do you tell yourself to make sure you get the shit done?
I think I just fall back on what's the bare minimum I need to do today. And that's create a reel for each account. Like everything's got to start from there. Like if the reels stop coming, the organic audience stop coming, the lead flow stops coming, everything in the business grinds to a halt. So I can just fall back on that. And when I have that lens, I'm like, wow, I've got the easiest job in the world. Like, although creating reels is tiring, exhausting, if you have 8 hours to create one reel, you can probably do it. You could do that sitting at the beach. You could do that. I could repost small content and just change the music. Like there's always a way to get that piece of one content out. And my thing is like, if I could just fall back on that and that's the only thing I have to do, it makes everything so much easier. It's a bit like the only thing you have to do is like get out of your bed. Then you get out of bed and then you're like, might as well make the thing. You make the thing and then it's like, all right, might as well put some breakfast on. Like you're just sort of taking it one step at a time. But I think if you can chunk your whole day, like what you have to achieve out of it, it's like the pure output is that one thing. Everything else is a bonus. I sort of have that mentality that like, if I can just do that one thing, everything else is a bonus. I'll do all the other stuff because I genuinely love it and it's exciting and it's new. And you know, the other side, yes, there's people relying on me now. But at the end of the day, like I wouldn't have put my hand up for it if I didn't think I was capable to deliver on that responsibility.
Do you have many of those days?
No, not really. I think like they're always going to come, but no, not really. I think sometimes you have some self-doubt and some questioning of like, what am I doing? Where is this going? What's like what's the end here? And that's what sort of happens when you're building a business like this, which is very cash flow heavy and it's not really an exitable brand. I think when you build a personal brand, unless you're building a physical product or something that has like some exit power, it can feel a little bit like, is this all just going to end one day? And it's like, people are just going to stop valuing the service and buying and coming new clients. And that sort of, yeah, I think can loom over you sometimes, but very rarely. Hasn't happened yet.
What do you tell yourself in those moments?
Just get shit done. Just keep working. Yeah, just put your head down. I think what you can't control, I think you can't be too stressed over, which is like an easy thing to say, very hard to execute. But at the end of the day, like you come back to the core inputs. So it's like if I'm, for example, like setting New Year's resolutions this year, I was like, I really want to grow on YouTube. I'd love to have like 25,000 subscribers. That'd be like a great end goal for me. But instead of writing that, I was like, I'm going to post 50 YouTubes this year. And that's like, it's like, I can't control the 25 1,000 subscribers. What I can control is that if I post 50 videos, there's a high chance I'm going to get better over those 50 videos. And if the content gets better, logically it follows it should be exposed to more people. And if I post consistently, more videos, more chance of it, reaching more people. So it's just like control what you can.
It's a reframing of the goals, Alfie, isn't it? Whilst those two things might lead to the end goal, instead of the goal being output focused, it's more input focused.
100%. And content creation is exactly the same. Focus on being a better creator. Focus on doing podcasting, exactly the same. Focus on building a better podcast studio. Done a lovely job here. Focus on asking better questions. Focus on reaching out to more guests to get better guests. All those things. You can't control the output. You can only control the input.
Do you find it hard to switch off, Alfie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all the time. I never really switch off until I go to bed. But yeah, I'm pretty wired and awake most of the day, which is good. It's incredibly productive. But yeah, I don't know. There's pros and cons.
How do you distill the noise? How do you there'll be a lot going on. How do you pick out the bits that you want to action on?
I think having a clear list of what you need to do.
Constantly making lists?
Yeah. Notes is full of multiple lists, super messy everywhere. Some stuff gets text, some doesn't. But just having a clear these are the things I need to do. And there's a baseline priority of what I need to do every day, which is more around content creation and checking in with the team, clients, those sort of things. And then there's just clear actionable things. And I'm someone that's if it's on the list, it's going to get done. And I'll just work until it gets done. And I just think if you can't, that's the problem these days. People can't sit still and work on something for 7 or 8 hours straight. And I'm not saying I do that every single day, but if it needs to get done, I'll do it.
How does that impact things outside of the personal brand?
I'm pretty all in, and I think I'm fortunate that the people around me accept that and know that was sort of the package deal at the moment I am in life. That it was I'm at this point in my life where I'm pretty all in on building this to as big as it can be. And there's a huge opportunity and responsibility of what I'm building and the vision of what I want to create. It's still a long way to go of where I want to get to. But with that comes I see work-life balance in the time horizon of a whole life. I don't see it in the time horizon of days, weeks, months, even years. I think it's I'm front-loading the work now. At the end of the day, you're going to have to work hard at some point in your life. It either comes now or it comes years from now when you've got a mortgage, kids, and you're shit, they need to go to school, those things. The way I almost see it is I want to work hard now so I can be there and be present with my kids in the future.
You mentioned that you're going to go and do a breathwork session after this today. That's obviously a good way to try and switch off. Is there any other things that sort of help you switch off?
Training for me is a big thing. Yeah, training for me is one of the best ways for me to switch off. I love it. And I think that's the awesome part is building a brand around something that you love. That is my switch off for me. And I do have that ability. I think a big one as well, now I'm hiring and building a team, not just globally, but actually where we are. Brought someone in full time who's doing the content. And I think having her film everything and me to not have to think about, oh, that's a really good shot, or I need to take that. Having someone who's just in the background filming stuff is going to be really influential for me as well and important because it creates that separation of I can just go about day-to-day life and more live in the present moment and they're capturing it for the future for editing and all that stuff.
And there's that trust there between you and
100%. Yeah.
Beautiful, mate. So mate, last question. What excites you for this year ahead?
Got some awesome travel lined up. I think also the way that we're building Amplify. So one of the biggest things I identified is that a lot of the creators in my network, they've built these awesome personal brands, but they themselves either don't want to, or they just haven't found a way yet to monetize because they don't understand their audience, or they don't want to go in and do it is a lot of work and setup and all of these things. So what's been awesome is as I've grown my network, I've been able to connect and plug more and more people into Amplify. So got some people like Noah, Raw Dog Boys, they're involved in it now. So they're basically now promoting Amplify on a larger revenue share. They're a part of the business. They get to implement new models. I get to take on advice from what they're doing. People like Alessio, all of my network now, Marley, they're basically jumping on and helping me build and promote and spread word of this mission that's spreading content creation and providing it as a viable tool for people to grow. And that's super gratifying, both for them and me, because they get an opportunity to give back to their audience and bring them into basically our world And, there's so many people that are interested in getting into content creation. So I think providing the tools and helping people make that first step on the journey is super exciting, and got some really cool plans in terms of doing like big offsites. Probably fly everyone out to Bali, do like some creator offsites, things like that, top amplified performers, like bring them in as well. And yeah, I think just really build a brand that resonates with people that want more out of life and are using content as a vessel to get there.
And away from the content creation, mate, you mentioned a bit of travel.
Yeah. So a bit of personal travel as well. Head to Japan end of February, gonna go ski.
Oh, beauty, mate.
I love switching off. It's one of the best ways to do it is skiing.
100%.
Like when I'm in the powder, that's me gone.
Yeah, I'm teeing that up for sort of Christmas, New Year's next year.
Yeah.
Japan skiing's it's been in the bucket list for a long time.
That's epic. You'll love
Can't
it.
wait, mate. And then just in terms of sort of training and stuff, mate, I know you've done a few marathons over the last year or so, did the Hawaii Marathon last year. Any big fitness events, anything coming up as well?
Nothing crazy. Maybe a high rocks, something like that. I think I don't have a huge desire to like push myself really hard physically. I think like I do that pretty well day to day, just maintaining physique, those things. I think I care a little bit more about like longevity, vitality at the moment where I am in life. Like the interest to go and run Ironmans and ultra marathons is not really there. The desire's not there. Maybe later in life, but business has been such a priority at the moment. So just honing in around that and just building and enjoying the process.
Nice, mate. Well, if you need a partner for the doubles at High Rocks,
there it
mate,
is.
yeah, we can lock that in for next year.
How did you go?
Yeah, good, mate. It was good fun. I think you'd like it. I think you'd really enjoy it. The energy on the day and in the place, like the setup is just it's very well set up.
I've heard good things.
Yeah, get involved, mate. We'll get a wee doubles on the go.
Love it.
Alfie, mate, thank you for coming in again. It's been fucking great, and it's been great to watch your journey over the past 12 months. I'm really excited to see what 2025 holds for you, mate. So thank you so much for giving up some more of your time today. I really appreciate it, brother.
Pleasure. Thank you.